You go away to Dubai for a break, and then you just can't catch one. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. And as you can tell, I think all of the energy and positivity that I kind of built up over the weekend has just evaporated this morning because, or actually probably more so last night, because, Arsenal fans are faced with yet more frustrating, irritating, gutting, repetitive, monotonous, bad news that we just continue to face. Like, you just have to start saying things like, "Well, what's the point? What's the point?" This season is just an utter write-off, or at least that's how it feels. And we'll talk about the reasons behind that and plenty more in today's show. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box: Maximius, James, Tom, Trader Mike, Carlton, Matt, Paul, Arasilki, Grantley Poos, Amira, Martin, Shari, Gooner76, Paul, Stevie. We've got Black Shine, we've got Stephen and running on empty, which definitely makes it sound like Arsenal running on empty. Colin, Paul, Z, Mohammed, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. It is very much appreciated, and I hope you've had a good week. You've made it to Wednesday. We're halfway through it, and not long until the weekend, where Arsenal will, of course, be facing Leicester City on Saturday, away from home in the early kickoff. But let's jump into today's slides, shall we? We start with yesterday's Champions League action, where Arsenal's potential opponents faced off against one another. Arsenal can face four different teams: Juventus, PSV, Feyenoord, and Milan, the teams that Arsenal could play. And Juventus took a 2-1 lead into the second leg of their last 16 playoff. So they will try and get through to the last 16 with that win. They will have to go now to PSV Eindhoven. But a 2-1 win against PSV is not necessarily guaranteeing them, but they've taken a step forward with that victory as well. So, yes, Juventus 2, PSV 1 across. And, of course, tonight we see Feyenoord host Milan. So that's the other game that's of relevance to Arsenal. Other games last night: Paris Saint-Germain beat Brest 3-0. Real Madrid, big 3-2 win over Manchester City away from home. City leading that game 2-1 until the final moments before Brahim Diaz and Jude Bellingham turned the score around. And Borussia Dortmund won 3-0. In Sporting. No Victor Gyökeres in the starting lineup of that game. He was brought off the bench in the second half for the home team. But not until the 60th minute was Gyökeres introduced to the field. Tonight, there are indeed more games to be played, more matches to be undertaken. Feyenoord and Milan, of course, are one of those. Club Brugge take on Atalanta. Celtic take on Bayern Munich, and Monaco take on Benfica. Next week, of course, will be the second legs of those playoff rounds. Moving forwards and into an interview I have done with Peter Walton, former Premier League referee. And if you want to give the article a read, of course, it's always, as usual, available on the football.london website. I spoke to Peter Walton yesterday and asked him a load of different questions about officiating, in particular, kind of the feeling around officiating at the moment, the challenges facing young referees who, of course, have got to deal with a lot of pressures, and with Michael Oliver and other referees facing continuous death threats and online abuse. Is it having an impact on kind of young referees entering the game? But I also asked him a lot about some of the decisions that have gone against Arsenal this season. In particular, I asked about kind of the conspiracies that fans suggest exist. And he talked about how Arsene Wenger spoke to him once about how convinced he was that there was a conspiracy against Arsenal. But he, of course, says that there is categorically no Arsenal conspiracy. I also asked him about his feelings about kind of the fallout of the Miles Lewis-Skelly red card and the FA charge that came following that successful appeal. Because from my perspective, why on earth would you charge a team for their behaviour when surrounding the referee of a decision that was found in post to have been the incorrect one and successfully appealed? And I said, in these kind of situations, do you think the FA should have applied more context? And to be fair to Peter Walton, he agreed that, in a perfect world, yes, they should have applied context, perhaps not charged Arsenal for their behaviour, considering it was, in essence, the wrong decision that was given and proven to be that. But you also pointed out that, where do you then kind of draw the line in these certain aspects? And I also asked him about the reports that emerged last week about celebration curbing, and how after Miles Lewis-Skelly's celebration of imitating Erling Haaland's celebration, I asked him about his thoughts as to what he feels regarding that. So if you want to read the interview, that is available on the football.london website, and I recommend you go and give that a read over there after you finish watching today's show. But of course, the big stories of yesterday were regarding Arsenal injuries. The first one on Takehiro Tomiyasu. According to Sammy Mokbel of the Mail, Arsenal are exploring the possibility of surgery to fix the knee injury that keeps on plaguing Tomiyasu's career. There's a lot of discourse around Tomiyasu yesterday, and naturally what happens when you see any story emerge about Tomiyasu and an injury, it sparks something of an unsavoury pile-on from Arsenal fans online, criticising the player of something that's utterly and entirely out of his control, while being completely unaware of his own situation or what he's going through. There's certainly question marks about his future at the club and what Arsenal need to do in the market in regards to Tomiyasu's presence or lack of presence. But when we talk about the player and the person, this is a guy that needs Arsenal's fans' support, not a player that needs backlash and criticism from fans for something that is utterly and entirely not his fault and completely outside of his own doing. So we do wish the absolute best of Tomiyasu and hope that he can recover and go through whatever procedures that he needs to go through to correct these issues. And as a result, Arsenal will need to respond to that, and we'll need to think about that in any future squad planning, of course, as well. So let's wait and see what goes down, and hopefully it's going to be all okay in the end. But in the short term, he needs to find a method. Arsenal need to find a strategy to try and fix these ongoing issues. However, the big report of yesterday and the big blow to Arsenal is that Havertz reportedly has suffered a hamstring problem while away with the Arsenal team in Dubai on one of those training camps. There's been some misinformation spread around, unfortunately, about how Havertz injured his hamstring. So I would be mindful of reading into too much about how indeed it happened, or any ITKs that are trying to misreport these stories. But what we are aware of, based upon Sammy's report, is that he has indeed suffered a hamstring injury that the club will be assessing this week and finding out the extent of. We don't know how serious this is. We don't know how light this is. We don't know if he's going to miss any games. We don't know ultimately what is going on with Kai Havertz. But what we do know is that it just continues this utterly ridiculous spate of misfortune that Arsenal have dealt with all season. And, it is a snowball effect. Gabriel Jesus being out, Saka being out, Ødegaard being out, the injury and illness that have hit the squad this season, it builds up, it snowballs, and players have to play more minutes than they otherwise would have done. And that, of course, increases the chance of fatigue, increases the chance of muscular injuries happening. And ultimately, Arsenal needed to go into the market in January and add the depth that we know that we needed. And they didn't. And we've sat here and we've agreed that the January window was an absolute colossal failure, because Mikel Arteta, the players, were crying out, suggesting that Arsenal needed to bring somebody in, and no one was brought in. No one came in. The people behind the scenes failed to find a solution to the problem, failed to find an answer to what Mikel Arteta was calling for. And it's just, it's incredibly frustrating. And we don't know ultimately what the extent of this injury is. We don't know how long Havertz is going to be out, if at all. But we do know that there has been a problem suffered while away with the team on this training camp. So, yeah, That's the situation. I don't really know what much more to say than that. What more can you say than that? It's so unlucky. But it's not like we didn't have an opportunity, of course, in January to do something about it. Right, let's go to part two. Some of your thoughts, your queries, your questions, and more right after this. Okay, this is part two of the show where we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your really positive and uplifting questions that make me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Let's not waste any time, shall we? Ace says, we're on our knees now with Champions League and Premier League to keep fighting for. Now I just hope that we stay in the top 5, of course, this season, which is not what we should be thinking of mid-February. No, it's not. It's not. We shouldn't be thinking about staying in the top 4/5 in the league this season. We need to think about trying to win things. When you're missing as many players that Arsenal are currently missing, that is very, 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 very difficult indeed. And yet you'll still get people saying that Arteta needs to go, by the way, at the end of the season if we don't win anything. Arasuki says, KSC has failed us. You wonder why Edu. You wonder why, if this is why Edu left. Dave says the battle for top 4 is basically on now. Of course, we're not in that situation yet. I think it's really important to still stay grounded, to not let your head spiral out too much. If we get into a situation where we are dropping points and that is the circumstance, then sure, we can have a conversation then. But I just don't think that spiraling into this kind of snowball effect of then worrying about being in a race for top 4 rather than anything else now needs to be our energy. Our energy doesn't need to be there. I know it's frustrating. I know we're down. I know we're frustrated. But let's keep the energy realistically where it is. And Arsenal currently are second. They are and have got a gap, of course, to those teams below them in the Premier League right now. And they've got a very, very favourable end to the season right now. You know, they're 9 points off of 6th place in the table. They are how many points? 7 points off of 4th in the table. Teams below them, like Chelsea, like Manchester City, like Newcastle, have been indifferent in their own form, as have Nottingham Forest, it's worth pointing out as well, even dropping points themselves recently. So let's stay grounded before we start to lose our minds. Okay, and we can face the music on top 4 races if and when that ever happens. But at the moment, Arsenal are in this situation. Gavin says, yeah, it got to be Edu's fault. It's always the guy that just let. I mean, I have said this, and I said this when Edu left. I have huge criticisms of Edu leaving when he left. He left his project half-baked. He left his project midway through a season. I think it's horrendous from Edu at the timing of when he left the club. Utterly horrendous. He's seeing out gardening leave with the club that prevents him from taking on a new job anyway, until a certain point. It's horrendous timing. And I think Edu is worthy of criticism for leaving Arsenal at the point that he did. Raj says, can we mention the incredible work Arsenal have done with the battle against cervical cancer? Raj, please enlighten me more so on this. And this comment snuck on from me, actually. Let me see if I can do a quick Google. Yes. Yesterday, Arsenal women and Beth Mead are using the North London Derby with Spurs to raise further awareness of MSD UK campaign to help eliminate cervical cancer. They're throwing their weight behind the Defend Your Tomorrow campaign, which aims to support the NHS's goal of eliminating cervical cancer by 2040. It was launched in collaboration with the Eve Appeal and will be marked at this Sunday's North London Derby. Arsenal will use their platform to promote a series of matchday messages, with activities also taking place to encourage supporters to visit their GP for the defendyourtomorrow.co.uk website information. So there is an article on the Sky Sports website. I imagine I might do a little bit of digging into this as well for a piece today. But thank you, Raj, for bringing that to my attention. So yes, we absolutely can mention and celebrate that incredible work that's being done. A very important topic indeed. Tristan says, Tom AFC Amden put out a post about Arteta wanted to deploy Mourinho as a 9, like Fellaini used to. Yeah, I wouldn't pay any attention to that tweet, mate. Mohammed says, this fiasco didn't just happen in January. The failure to properly build a squad started when we closed to register 21 players only. Why should we care if the club doesn't care itself? I mean, it's an interesting one, this whole care thing, isn't it? You know, we are pointing fingers left, right, and centre. For me, I'm looking at the recruitment team. I'm not looking at the ownership. I'm looking at the people who are in charge of finding those players. I'm looking at Jason Ato. I'm looking at the executives that are working with those to find the solutions, the scouts, the analysts. You're looking at them because we know that money was made available, because we know that through the proposal that was made for Ollie Watkins. So it's not like there wasn't money to spend in January. We know that. So the ownership have made money available to spend. Arteta has come out and said that he wants to sign players. So it is on the people whose job it is to find those solutions, to find them within the means that we have, and they didn't. And that, for me, is where my energy is regarding criticism. So there you go. Let's go to Aop says, maybe there's more to Edu leaving that deserves further investigation instead of criticising him personally. There's probably a lot more of the story on all sides, including Edu, to share the blame. I mean, from my understanding of the situation, it's very clear that Evangelos Marinakis' multi-club model approached him about a senior CEO position, which he has been very minded to accept based upon the financial package alongside that as well that was offered to him. He decided to leave Arsenal midway through the season as a result, and was placed on gardening leave until the end of his, to the end of the period that he needs to see out, which goes into 2025. So I absolutely find that there is reason to point the finger at criticism. Arsenal also, it's worth pointing out, as was very well reported by Sami Mokbel, made a counter offer to keep Edu at the club. So let's not pretend that there isn't, Arsenal trying to make the effort to keep Edu, because they did. It was his decision to leave, and so for me, that's worthy of the scrutiny. Ethan says, who does this leave to come in behind Sterling, Nwaneri, and Trossard? I mean, Butler, Odeji, Kabia. I mean, you can't help but think that Chido Obi-Martin would probably be getting some minutes right now had he stayed at Arsenal. Phil says, I still understand how the club decided against signing a loan player when there was plenty out there available, most notably Kolo Muani, who is killing it at Juve right now. Tom says, should we expect Butler Oyedeji to get a bigger role now, or is there someone else that we should look at? If Butler Oyedeji is the one, could you provide some insight on the type of player that is? Not really. He went on loan to Cheltenham last season, didn't score. Went on loan, I think, the season before that. I'm not sure if he scored then either. He did get the PL2 Player of the Month award earlier in the campaign, playing for the under-21s, but he is now 22. So he has quite a significant senior advantage against a lot of the players that he's up against. So, yeah, I can't say, with respect to a young player who is, same age as Calafiori, that I've got much hope at the moment. Grant says, having followed Arsenal for 54 years, I can't remember a season with so much bad luck in refereeing decisions and injuries. Have you? In my 30 years, I can't either, mate. No, it's been absolutely ridiculous. Orange Juice says, Tom, what do you make of the feel about the news and public backlash of the Visit Rwanda sponsorship and the club continuing with them? I'd be lying if I didn't feel uncomfortable. If you want to read a piece about kind of further into it, Sam Dean of the Telegraph wrote a piece. I'll read you the headline. It's quite striking. Dead bodies are decomposing on the streets of Goma. The UN has described immense human suffering and a death toll nearing 3,000 following a Rwanda-backed offensive. Arsenal's sponsorship deal with Visit Rwanda has become impossible to justify. So I'd recommend giving that piece that Sam's written a read to get a bit clued up on that situation. But yeah, Orange Juice, I would be lying if I said I don't feel uncomfortable with it. Ashley says, sixth forward for next season. Centre forward and winger is coming. I'd sell Leo, Ethan, and focus on a midfielder. Weirdly, I'd buy Adama Traore from Fulham. He's on a free, terrible finisher, but still attracts 2 to 3 players towards him in open space, maybe even 4 others as well. I don't know if Adama Traore is the answer, but at the moment we just need players, or we just need depth, don't we, in the options that we've got as well. Dissent says the ownership is first to blame. They made money available to make a random bid of 45 or whatever bid that was. Why they didn't make money available to trigger the release clause for Gyökeres? Because I can't explain this in more times. I don't know if Dissent, you've been listening to previous shows. I don't know if you've been listening to enough episodes or whether you were listening at all. I have explained this a number of times. I can't explain it anymore. Arsenal cannot activate Gyökeres's release clause. There was not the financial freedom to be able to do that. UEFA Financial Fair Play have restricted us from being able to do that. So I can't explain that enough times now. It should be fairly consistent. So there was money available to an extent, certainly not for a release clause, which have to be paid up front, of course, but certainly not for a €100 million release clause of a player. So no, that's not how it works. AJ says, we just need players, like everyone in the chat has been saying for weeks, and you have been quashing those. AJ, I think, has been missing a few shows here and there, I think. Will says, a lot of hamstring injuries in the space of, 6 to 8 months. Do you reckon there is something not being done or being overdone with the S&C team? The amount of football is really racking up. It's just a misfortune, isn't it, Will? Like, ultimately, injuries, especially muscular, they are and can be linked naturally to fatigue, but we are experiencing just significantly more frequent problems. So, yeah, we're looking into it. We're looking into a situation that just is getting away from us. Nick says, I think when he was at Man City, Zinchenko has played as a false nine, but we are scraping the barrel, if I'm thinking of that. I think Zinchenko could play in midfield, but not as a false nine. I think we're going a bit too far there. Lynn says, in my humble opinion, Arteta has been let down badly by the ownership, and also the players have also been let down by the ownership as well. So let's just get rid of this loser. Wilson says, are you serious that there is another injury again, Tom? Oh, hell no. Total incompetence from Arsenal of not addressing the attacking positions in the first place. Bloody hell. You can't say it's anything other than incompetence to not address the areas that we needed when you've got so much publicity regarding the need and when Arteta's coming out and saying things. I feel like I am going around in circles. And Magic Mike says, we are nowhere near the FFP limits. If Guinness releases clause was seen to be worth it by Arsenal, we could have done it. Mike, I'm just telling you what I'm being told from my sources that are very well connected in the club, that while PSR is certainly more free, UEFA Financial Fair Play is not. So I'm afraid that you're not online with the reality of it at the moment. Sugar says, any realistic options on the free agency side of things? Sadly, I don't think so. Shall I have a look at the free agents that are available right now? Free agents, transfer marked. Free agents on transfer marked. Shall we have a look at who's available? The highest rated player is Daniel Amate. Wissam Ben Yedder, although I wouldn't go anywhere near that. Ryan Kent, 28-year-old, available, left winger. Presedo, 30-year-old Colombian attacker. Serge Aurier. Oh, we're getting into the real good stuff here. Yeah, there isn't any, I'm afraid. Cass says, are there any players who are free? We've done that one, so no is the answer. There aren't. Phil says, Tom, do you think that we have way too much to do in the summer to fill the squad properly so we don't leave ourselves short again like this season? I mean, we've got a lot of stuff to do, but there is expectations of squad turnover, of course, that would leave us in a position to be able to tackle those things. AFC Till I Die says, with our depleted attacking options, could we not try Calafiori up front? Are we really saying that we're trying these players up front than we would before Trossard, Sterling and Nwaneri? That we'd rather see Calafiori up front? I don't know. Amara Gunness says, Tom, so people who didn't rate Edu now, moaning, he's let us down, can't fathom that out is being something of a hypocrite. I don't think so. I think you can look at what Edu did while he was at Arsenal and look at the successes that we saw and then criticize him for leaving. I don't think it's binary, mate, as so many things are. You can definitely look at the work that Edu did while he was here as a very positive thing and also criticize the fact that he has left Arsenal half-baked. So I don't think there's any hypocrisy there. You can hold two opinions at the same time that may seem to be conflicting, but they're not, because they exist in different time frames. Dixon says, Arsenal are still solid enough to squeeze wins given our attack is depleted. Let's ensure that we don't give away cheap goals. Mark says, I just think if worst case scenario, we have to be creative with Timber, White and Tierney playing further forward for valuable minutes. Ian says, also hamstring injuries occurring to our wingers may be related to how much they have had to come back sprinting and defending and how we are set up. Maybe tactically we have to change. Salah doesn't necessarily track back. I'd be curious to see the numbers on that side of things, because it's something that is said a lot, that we don't necessarily look at the that we don't necessarily look into the kind of that side of whether or not there is a link between the defensive work rate of this team and injuries related to I don't know is the answer. I don't have the data. I don't know what the link is. I don't know if there's anything to be said. And also at that same time, are we then going to say, okay, the players need to track back less? Would we then concede more goals as a result? It's a very interesting and fine line between those. Luke says, it's very simple. We use the attackers from the academy. Playing senior players out of position is not the answer. The academy players will have to prove that they are good enough. Joseph says, apparently Havertz has run 11k and Salah, is that per game? So it's like he runs 1 kilometer more than Salah per game. 11 kilometers a game running. Is that... the thing is, I don't know how significant that is. I thought it might have been more than that, to be honest. I thought the gap might have been bigger. Are we saying that 1 kilometer a game is something to think about in terms of injury? I don't know. I don't know the mechanics, the medical mechanics of it all. Arthur says, Kai Havertz missed a few chances and people piled into him again. You make your own luck sometimes in this world. Ashley says, with Adama, he still has his PNP for at least 2 years. Those big under the cosh away games in the Premier League and Champions League, last 20 minutes of games, those pile up in fixtures in December and January. These last 2 months where defenders are tired. Henko says, I guess Tom is not for the positive spin now. It's funny, isn't it? You know, it's it's almost like I have an opinion and people don't understand when suddenly it's not always the most positive. They're like, hold on, I thought Tom was putting a positive spin on everything. Almost like that's not been the case. Sean says, Carlos Vela, anybody, please? Tom, can Fanny agree with us that we need bodies? So let's start bringing them in. I think, and you're in a situation like this, you absolutely need bodies. You know, ideally you don't, but when you're in a situation like this, you'd rather have a body than a youth player coming in, wouldn't you? Akaya says, I just wish Odegaard, Moreno, Rice could score more goals. Me too, mate. Absolutely, me too. Ian says, running and sprinting are different. Don't know about that. Also, Tomiyasu not being back yet. It's worrying. Steve says, so much for Havertz being a physical monster. Is the top 4 under question? Jamsey says, with the 5+ players expected to leave in the summer, do you think there'll be enough to fill out the correct holes and replace the potential departures of Zinni, Tierney, Partey, Jorginho, Neto, and Sterling? You certainly hope so, don't you? You absolutely do. eBay says, Tom, I love the channel, but I don't understand your sudden negativity. Well, we've come full circle. We have come. We're now a negative channel. That's what we are now. We're now a negative channel. Sorry, I'll continue this. I don't understand your negativity these days. Don't let our depressed fan base kill the joy. What do you want me to do, eBay? We had a horrendous January transfer window. Our injury situation is deplorable. Our manager's come out actively and said that he wants to bring in strikers. Our ownership has sanctioned 40 million plus for a player, knowing therefore that we have money available for players to be brought in. Our best player has been missing for months. Our other best player has not been in top form whatsoever this season off the back of another serious ankle injury and subsequent illness that affected more than just him. We've had refereeing decisions go against us left, right and centre that you will never, ever see happen again whatsoever. Our young player has been sent off by an arrogant referee that then turns around and gets a charge given against, despite the fact of a successful appeal going for him. We've seen our sporting director leave midway through the season, leaving a project half-baked. We've had moments in games like against Fulham where teams have, Martinelli's been an inch offside that have cost us from picking up a massive, massive victory. We've drawn against the likes of Liverpool despite clearly deserving more from it. We've been eliminated from the FA Cup despite missing massive chances and penalties, and of course seeing some ridiculous situations occur in that game with a centre forward that is now our only option and then is now injured for a hamstring injury. So I think, and despite all that, I'm negative. It's yeah, it's quite something. It's quite something. I can't win. I'm too positive. I'm too negative. Uh, it's embarrassing for me, really, Darren. You're right. It's subtly embarrassing. Blade says you had no injuries a lot. Yeah, we had no injuries. None. We didn't spend 40 million on a player that wasn't able to play more than 45 minutes in 2 games all season. Yeah, that's we had no injuries. Oh dear goodness gracious. It's like these people are real. Like I don't think they are bots. Like I think they're genuinely real people. And that's a real worry. A real worry. Tom says, you can't win, mate. No, you can't. You really, really can't. Mash Feig says, Tom, stay positive, mate. How much of our lack of transfer activity is down to not having the upfront money for transfer fees? It's not about money. There was options in terms of loans that we could have done. There was short-term investments we could have made, and we didn't. And it was on the recruitment team to find the solutions based upon the financial situation that we are in. It's their job to work under those restrictions. It's up to them to be able to do that. And that's what they're paid very big money to do. So when your manager's coming out and saying, I need this, it is on them, of one of the most elite clubs in the world, to deliver him that. So it's not about not having the money to do anything. I'm not fussed about Arsenal not spending 100 million on a player. I've never asked for Arsenal to do that in January because I know that it wasn't feasible. But it was feasible for us to invest some funds, to invest in a short-term deal, or to find a solution like, I don't know, making Neto permanent on a £1 or £2 million deal, and then finding a Premier League loan player until the end of the season. This is it. Amira's spot on with this. 2 things can be true. We didn't do enough in January, but we've been ridiculously unlucky this season. This is exactly right. These 2 things can be true. We have been incredibly unlucky, but we didn't respond to that bad luck. We didn't take that into our own hands when we had the opportunity to. And I remember, I don't remember like when we were sitting in a press conference with Mikel Arteta and he turned round and said, we will find out if this was the right decision. In fact, what was the game that we played? Was it the Man City game? Was that the first game after the break? Let me see if I can find the press conference. Matches, results. Yes. So, no, it wasn't that, was it? It was the Newcastle game. So, Newcastle pre-match press conference. Arteta. Every word, pre-Newcastle presser. So let's find the quote. I don't know what it was he specifically said. I'm not going to use the Arsenal website one. I'll use my one. I'll use the one that I wrote because it is actually every word. Let me see. Press conference. Arteta on Newcastle deadline day and team news. Is this it? No, that's the press live blog. Every word. Is this it? Yes, this is it. Okay. I've got to read through the whole thing. That's the problem. With a clear intention, which is always there is a window open to explore the opportunities to improve our squad with the players that can impact it. We haven't achieved it, so we are disappointed in that sense. But as well, we are very aware that we only want to bring certain kind of players, and we have to be very disciplined with that as well. And I think that we will. I asked him whether he was frustrated with the kind of the situation. Let me find that question. Yes. He says no, because when you try your best and you do things with the right process and you see the people that we will all share the same intentions and wills, and after you don't achieve it, for sure there are things to learn from it. There always are. But you have to move on, and that's a piece that was important in the moment, and now we have to move on, and nobody knows whether it is better to have done it or not. We'll know probably at the end of the season. So that's the quote. He said, you have to move on, and that's a piece that was important in the moment, and for now, We have to move on. And nobody knows whether it is better to have done it or not. We'll probably know at the end of the season. We'll know on the 12th of February because we know now just less than 2 weeks after that. I mean, what date was that press conference done on? It was done on February 4th. 8 days, just over a week later, we know now that it wasn't the right decision. It wasn't the end of the season that we found out. It was 8 days later that not doing any business or not being successful in signing players was the wrong decision. Halik says, you think that we will play more youngsters now? I mean, I don't think we've got much choice, have we? I think we have to see more. I mean, we've seen games where like we've barely made any substitutions when we've got youngsters on the bench, but those games have been pretty close. If we're winning games comfortably, Arteta has to bring those kids on. Absolutely has to bring those kids on. Luke says, or we can go back to a back five and try and make us difficult to break down, leaving Sterling and Trossard up top. Z says, how many chances has Havertz missed past 5 games? Martinelli would play there, but guess he is also injured. Logan says it was a gamble and we lost. Derek says Liverpool win tonight and it will really top it all off. Also, a new jacket will sort this. Get some more merchandise, people. Ian says, I think looking back, summer dealing was not as effective as it could have been. We should have looked to move Jesus on or loan or sell. I think he was fit then and he was not good for a long time as well. I don't think there was really any offers for Jesus, unfortunately, in the summer. Stephen says, just wondering about Tommy and insurance. Does it run for 12 months or a set period? Can't believe they get wages covered indefinitely. Insurance is there, of course, for players when they get injured and things like that. But I don't know the finer details, Stephen, of how long it lasts or how much it covers. But I just know that there is insurance there, of course, for players when they are out injured. So, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Joseph says, I can't find anything for the league, but in the UCL, Havertz runs about 73.5 kilometers. What? That can't be right. 73 kilometers a game. What? So he's running more than a marathon? What? He's running nearly 2 marathons a game, Joseph. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't sound right. I mean, that's very impressive. But if he's running nearly 2 marathons in 90 minutes, I'm not surprised his hamstrings have gone. He'd need about 18 hamstrings to do that. That can't be right, Joe. I don't know. Maybe that's across the 8 Champions League games we played so far. That must be across the 8 games that we've played. Surely, let me get my calculator out. We can do some maths together if you like, but it's not per game. It can't be. 73.5 divided by 8. So he's run 9.18 kilometers per game. That sounds about right. So he's run about 9.18 kilometers per game. Salah's run 66, but I don't think Salah played in the last one, did he? So 66 divided by 7, 9.42. That's really interesting. Okay, so let's have a look, shall we? Havertz and Salah. I will just double check these numbers for the Champions League games. And Mohamed Salah. And by the way, Liverpool won all of their Champions League games besides the last one. So they pretty much coasted through these. Salah played 7 games. Havertz played 8 games. In terms of minutes, Havertz played 561 minutes. Salah played 603. So Salah actually played more minutes across these Champions League games than Havertz did. But if we have a look at the per match breakdown of distance in terms of how much they're running per game, based upon these stats that Joseph has provided us, so 73.5. So we'll first do Salah. So 66 kilometers per game is 9. I'm going to put it into the chat just so we've got a record of it. 9.42 kilometers per game is Salah. Okay, so that's Salah's per game kilometers. Havertz runs 73.5 divided by 8 is 91. Sorry, 9.19 9.19 per game, and that's Havertz. So based upon the Champions League numbers, Salah is running more per match in the Champions League than Havertz is. I think that's a surprise. Is that not a surprise? I think that. Thank you, Joe, for the numbers. That's an interesting one. That the fact that we're seeing in the Champions League, Salah's running more per match than Havertz is. And yeah, that's a strange one. Apparently, I've got my maths wrong. That's why we don't do maths live on stream. But according to those, the numbers of what they've run across the 8 games per match, Havertz has run less than. How have I done this wrong? How I don't get it. 73.5 is what Havertz played. No, according to Joe. Oh, I've lost interest. I've lost interest in this already. Ambly says, I think comparing to Salah is a bit pointless anyway. He's physically a freak. Salah's fitness is not normal, even for that of an athlete. Arthur says, we're surprised Havertz, Odegaard and Saka have been injured with our pressing style. It's funny, isn't it? Like, we're now saying that the pressing style or the system is the result of these injuries, but it's that system and the pressing style that's got Arsenal back to competing for titles. So I'm a little confused here. Are you saying that you don't want Arsenal's players to press? You don't want Arsenal's players to play the system that has got us into this position where we are as competitive as we are? Is that what you're arguing? Because what's the alternative? Are you arguing, therefore, that we should press less? Are you arguing, therefore, that we shouldn't play this type of system that's got us to where we are because it's having these impacts? I don't think it's to do with the system. I think it's to do with the number of minutes that they're playing. I think it's to do with the fact that we don't have enough depth that Arteta is not relying upon. I think he keeps players on too long in games. I think he needs to make substitutions sooner. We need to have better depth in the squad so that Arteta is feeling more comfortable to bring players on. Players stay on far too long. I was shocked that Declan Rice played the whole game against Newcastle the other night, for example. Don't really understand why Declan Rice did play the full game against Newcastle. He didn't need to, but he did, despite the fact they're trying to manage his minutes. So it's things like that. That I think is where we need to look more scrutinizingly. Anyway, I think we've gone round in a few circles today, quite frankly, which isn't surprising. You know, in summary, this sucks, is what it is. This just sucks, and that's just what it is. And we've made mistakes. We should have done some short-term business in January. It really is as simple as that. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning. I won't be with you on Friday, though, because the press conference is early on Friday, but hopefully you'll still have a show in place for then. We'll see you again very soon. Have a great day. And as always, stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, and up the Arsenal.